Hello and good evening. This is L24 News. I'm Abdurrahim Kashur and to the headlines. Chinese city of Tianjin to test 40 million people after COVID outbreak, and the port near Beijing has begun mass testing after 20 children and adults tested positive, including at least 2 with Omicron. As ordered is restored in Kazakhstan, its future remains murky. The tragic event of last week, in which dozens lost their lives, have exposed hidden political tensions. An airstrike in Ethiopia's Tigray region killed 56 people and injured 30, including children, in a camp for displaced people. Amazing milestone, James Webb telescope fully deployed in space. Webb's travel will scan the cosmos for light streaming from stars and galaxies from 30 billion years ago. Hello again and welcome. Following a wave of recent COVID-19 cases, including 2 caused by the Omicron strain, the city of Tianjin advised its 40 million residents to stay at home while undertook mass COVID testing. Chinese officials are already dealing with the major outbreak in Xi'an, in the country's northwest, which has raised questions about the country's zero-tolerance policy of severe lockdowns and mass testing to combat outbreaks. It is worth mentioning that there was no bigger lockdown order in the northern Chinese city. India's second most populated state, Maharashtra, has introduced new restrictions as cases continue to surge in the region. The state has announced a night curfew from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. starting from January 10th. In addition to that, the government has also shut schools and colleges till February 15. The country reported on Sunday 159,632 new COVID cases, which is over a 5-fold increase since the beginning of the new year on January 1st. The total number of new cases was only 27,000. According to data shared by worldometers.com, the United States on Saturday reported over 466,000 new cases of the coronavirus disease, which pushed the overall tally nearly 61 million. On January 3rd, the country set a global record in a daily tally with 1,080,211 cases. The Omicron virus of COVID-19 is wreaking havoc across the United States as the country continues to record alarming increase the number of infections on the daily basis. Protesters rallied across Europe against their government policy of COVID-19 vaccine passes. In France, more than 100,000 people marched across to show their fury against the plan of this mandatory vaccine. Marim Ziano, what follow?
In most of Western Europe, citizens took the streets to express their anger against COVID-19 vaccine requirements. In France, over 100,000 people rallied against the government's new plans of vaccination requirements that will be applied by January 15th. In Paris, 18,000 demonstrators carried posters that read "Truth, Freedom, No to Vaccine Pass," and chanted a phrase replying to Macron's statement that resulted in chaos with the same language. According to the French Interior Ministry, 10 people were arrested in the capital and 24 others across France, with some police officers slightly injured. Whereas in Vienna, 40,000 people rallied against vaccine passports requirement, which will be implemented starting from next month. In Germany, protesters rallied in many cities, with a great majority in Hamburg holding posters that read "Enough, hands off our children," since the government is considering to vaccinate children. Vaccination opponents and coronavirus deniers, according to the German health minister Karl Lauterbach, have lost all measure and emphasis in their arguments.
A small group is willing to wipe all scientific knowledge off the table and voluntarily enter the bulb of bogus truths.
And in Italy as well, people protested against the vaccination rules for people above 50 and the people who use public facilities.
To a different matter now, Kazakhstan's situation has not witnessed a general order restoration, mainly in the country's riot epicenter, Almaty. Dozens of people have been killed, thousands have been detained, and public buildings across Kazakhstan have been torched over the past week in the worst violence experienced in the oil and uranium producer since it became independent in early 90s as the Soviet Union collapsed. Ayed Osama.
Kazakhstan is still witnessing messy circumstances which affected the country's security and stability. Thousands of citizens are still taking the streets against the last price spike in the country, which remains unacceptable for the people. Over 3,000 people were detained during the riots in the country's industrial capital Almaty. Numbers of citizens amidst Kazakh security forces, in addition to protesters, were put to death during the violent clashes which went nationwide. Kazakhstan's former intelligence chief has been arrested on suspicion of treason as the former Soviet Republic cracks down on a wave of unrest and starts to assign blame. A number of strategic facilities in Kazakhstan are under the guard of the Russian-led military alliance invited to restore order, according to the presidential office on Sunday, amid the deadliest outbreak of violence in the country's 30 years of independence. Tokayev's office stated that he had told Russian President Vladimir Putin in a phone call that the situation was stabilizing. Tokayev has ordered his troops to shoot to kill to end what he has called attacks by bandits and terrorists. The Kremlin said Putin backed Tokayev's idea to convene a video call of leaders from the Collective Security Treaty Organization, under whose umbrella Russia and 4 other former Soviet republics have sent troops into Kazakhstan to help restore order. It was not clear when this would take place.
At least 56 people have been killed and 13 others wounded in Ethiopia's Tigray region following a raid on camp for civilians displaced by the brutal conflict in the northern region. In a tweet on Saturday, Getachew Reda, spokesman for the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, said another callous drone attack by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's forces on a camp for internally displaced people in the debate had claimed the lives of 56 innocent civilians. The Ethiopian government announced on Friday that it would forgive and release some of the country's most famous political prisoners to facilitate national dialogue. Political prisoners announced on Friday include opposition leader Jawad Mohammed, senior Tigray party officials, and prominent members of rebellious Tigrayan People Liberation Front. At least 200 people are believed to have been killed in villages in the northwestern Nigeria state of Zamfara during a deadly reprisal attack by armed bandits. Residents returned to the village on Saturday after the military organized mass burials. The state government said 58 people had been killed during the attacks. At least 22 tourists died in freezing temperatures after being stranded in heavy snow in Pakistan northern Murree city, where thousands had flocked to enjoy the snow. Some 1,000 vehicles are still stuck in Murree, 14 miles northeast of the capital, Islamabad. Sarfurjani has more to be clarified.
Heavy snow trapped thousands of cars on roadways while falling in the area of the Murree Hills Resort overnight Friday and early on Saturday. The snow was so severe that heavy equipment brought to clear the area initially got stuck during the night. Officials called in parliamentary troops and a special military mountain unit to help.
For the first time in Pakistan, such a huge number of tourists went to Murree, which created this huge crisis. So we had to close all traffic to Murree. Some people have been rescued, while some have returned. At least 16 to 19 have died in their vehicles. Locals in the area are also delivering food and blankets. We're only allowing in vehicles with food and blankets, or anyone in an emergency situation.
Pakistan's emergency service released a list naming 21 people confirmed dead. Emergency officials distributed food and blankets to people while they were trapped in their snowed-in vehicles, but many died of hypothermia. Others may have died from carbon monoxide poisoning after running their car heaters for long periods of time.
The situation is really disastrous here and people are very anxious. We have provided medicine, water, food supplies to help them tide over adversities.
Prime Minister Imran Khan said he was shocked and upset by the tragedy, but that the unprecedented snowfall and rush of people caught district admin unprepared. By late Saturday, most roads leading to the area's resorts were largely cleared of snow and thousands of vehicles had been pulled out, but more than 1,000 were still stuck.
Turkmen president has called put to close of the country's most famous but abandoned site, the burning natural gas cutter known as the Gates of Hell, which had been burning for decades and was a popular tourist attraction where a tiny number of people will close. According to Turkmen portal, the cutter was caused by the gas drilling collapse in 1971. Geologists light a fire to stop the gas from spreading, expecting the gas to burn off in a few weeks. As another step toward the rise of tension between the two countries, Iran has imposed sanctions on dozens more Americans, many of them from the U.S. military, after the 2020 killing of the General Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike attack. According to Reuters, Iran's foreign minister said that the 51 Americans had been targeted for what is called terrorism and human rights violations. The step lets Iranian authorities seize any assets that hold in Iran, but the apparent absence of such assets means it will likely be a symbolic. US-Russia's diplomatic negotiators are preparing together for discussion over the Russian troop deployment near the borders of Ukraine. The talks, which take place in Geneva, have been preceded by the declaration from both poles. Ayadu Usama to be clarified.
The next meeting, which gathers Russian and US negotiators, will be next week for a talk over striking military exercises. This comes at a time that the crisis between the two world poles have escalated regarding the military deployment of Russian troops to their frontiers with Ukraine. Officials from the US raised the possibility of restricting military maneuvers and missile deployments in Eastern Europe, as long as Russia reciprocates ahead of talks on growing tensions as Russian forces encircle Ukraine.
Russia's aggressive actions are a threat to peace and security in Europe. We're prepared to respond forcefully to further Russian aggression. But a diplomatic solution is still possible and preferable if Russia chooses it.
Comments of US officials came ahead of US-Russia's diplomatic talks beginning that will take place on Sunday night. These negotiations aim to de-escalate tensions in Eastern Europe. Nearly 100,000 Russian military troops are considered a threat on Ukraine, which claim the deployment to be an attempt to invade their country. Sergei Ryabkov, Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation, says diplomacy could fail after one session as Russia is not ready to make any concessions over the deployment of troops, which they consider national internal affairs.
It was a very strong and unified message from all allies today that we need to engage in dialogue in good faith and actually do whatever we can, make every effort to ensure a political path forward.
Senior US official explained that his country is not willing to discuss limits on deployment. Their aim is to make restrictions for both sides over missile deployment in the area. Russia's foreign ministry stated that the negotiation team led by Ryabkov had arrived in Geneva, where the formal talks are due on Sunday.
Cyprus Foreign Minister Nikos said on Sunday he had tendered his resignation in an internal power struggle within ruling right-wing conservatives on their candidate for presidential elections in 2023. Nikos was appointed as foreign minister in March 2018. The Princess Basma bint Saud, a daughter of Saudi Arabia's second king, is finally released with her daughter by the authorities after being detained in the kingdom from 2019 under mysterious circumstances. The reasons is still not clear, but in 2020, the Saudi mission to the United Nations in Geneva told the working groups on arbitrary detention that Princess Basma stood accused of criminal offenses involving attempting to travel outside the kingdom illegally. Egyptian authorities have released Rami Shat, an Egyptian and Palestinian human rights activist, from prison for more than 900 days after having him abandon Egyptian citizenship. Rami Shat arrived in France on Saturday after being imprisoned in Egypt for over 2 years. Rami was a member of several secure political groups in Egypt and co-founder of Egyptian pro-Palestinian BDS movement. After being given to the representative of the Palestinian Authority in Cairo, he was sent to Amman, Jordan, where he boarded a plane to Paris. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang to Africa continue his tour, which looms to pave the way to China to enter the African continent. On the other hand, it is seen as a reaction to Washington's attempt to dominate the Asia-Pacific region. Islam Said on what follow.
The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi carries on his tour in Africa. Wang said China would appoint a special envoy to the Horn of Africa, a region of East Africa that often suffers from unstable conflicts.
The visit comes very early in the year and is a testament to the commitment by our two governments towards fostering and deepening our bilateral relations for the mutual benefit of our people.
Beijing has shifted its diplomatic focus and initiatives to the region for some time, which met with the opposition from the United States sanctioning Ethiopia and Eritrea after the Tigray War was recently dismissed from priority trade program on allegations of human rights abuses. The Horn of Africa is preparing to become a major of strategic competition between the United States and China, because this act is seen as a reaction to the U.S. economic, political, and military influence on the Indo-Pacific area. From Beijing's perspective, the Horn of Africa is one of the most important potential military hotspots under the Belt and Road Initiative, and it is no coincidence that this is where the first foreign military bases are located. Wang Yi's trip included the east coast of Africa and Comoros in the Western Indian Ocean. China believes that the stability of the African region is vital. However, Ethiopia, China's important economic partner, is in a state of ethnic conflict and civil war. Another problem was the role of the United States in slightly supporting and effectively placing the Tigray army on its side, claiming human rights abuses by governments to divide and weaken both countries and gain geopolitical clout. China and Africa prospered on the premise of non-interference with the domestic affairs and respect for national sovereignty. This allows Beijing to easily support the standard position of Ethiopia and Eritrea after U.S. intervention. However, Beijing needs more diplomatic and political support to resolve these conflicts. The Horn of Africa is experiencing a regional Cold War at the micro level. It is a battle over the gates to the Red Sea and Europe. China is strengthening relations with all the local political parties. The United States is trying to undermine it by creating a military and political presence outside the Chinese maritime affairs, which is the main venue for the competition.
A prominent Afghan university professor and outspoken critic of Taliban leadership has been arrested in Kabul. Faidullah Jalal, a longtime professor of law and political science at Kabul University, has made several appearances on television talk show since the US-backed government was pushed out in August, blaming the Taliban for worsening financial crisis and criticizing them for ruling by force. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa has stated that ruling African National Congress ANC must try to reclaim popular support after being submerged in the corruption scandals and torn apart by disputes. On the occasion of the ANC 110th anniversary, Ramaphosa struck a somber tone, emphasizing that the Nelson Mandela-led party, which helped South Africa attain democracy, has lost voters' support. The ECOWAS conference follows months of rising tension about the timeline for restoring civilian authority in Mali following a military coup in 2020. As a result of ECOWAS sanctions, Qatar stated that civilian authority will be restored in February 2022 after presidential and parliamentary election. More in this report.
Following military coups in August 2020 and May 2021, the Economic Community of West African States banned Mali, penalizing authorities judged responsible for postponing elections and threatening more sanctions. Likewise, Western African governments have recently urged that Mali junta sticks to its preparation for February elections, threatening further undefined sanctions if Bamako fails to commit to returning to democracy. West African leaders met Sunday to address Mali's political problem with the military's government about providing a revised calendar for a return to civilian rule after its original plan was rejected. Following the threat of sanctions, Keita committed to restore civilian rule in February 2022, following presidential and parliamentary elections. Mali must hold elections in February, according to ECOWAS. However, the Malian administration stated that an election date would be chosen only after a countrywide meeting, noting that a peaceful vote should not be made in a rush. Subsequently, Malian state television reported that the military administration presented a fresh recommended timeline to the coalition's president on Saturday. The extraordinary summit has pushed Mali to keep its promise to conduct elections early this year. The coalition's legitimacy is jeopardized as it strives to defend core principles of government while also containing regional turmoil. Asset freezes and travel restrictions within the ECOWAS region were maintained against the 150 military leaders and their families, with more economic and financial penalties to be established.
More international news in this roundup by Marwa Al-Iwar and Zara Furjani.
Albanian police fired tear gas and water cannons on Saturday as protesters stormed into the headquarters of the opposition Democratic Party in an extended power struggle between party rivals.
As Serbia faces numerous environmental problems following decades of neglect, hundreds of people in Serbia spent their holiday protesting and blocking roads against the plans for lithium mining in the Balkan country. Anti-mine activists have organized weekly gatherings to keep pressure on the populist government of President Aleksandar Vučić to scrap the possibility of lithium excavation in western Serbia. Prime Minister Ana Brnabić declared that her government was close to annulling any deals with multinational mining company Rio Tinto, which has explored the area and wants to extract lithium.
The United Nations said it would invite Sudanese military leaders, political parties and other groups to take part in a political process aimed at ending a crisis unleashed by a coup in October.
After Djokovic was denied entry to Australia after landing in Melbourne to defend his Australian Open title, a court was meant to be held. However, an offer by the Australian government to delay his appeal against deportation has been rejected by a judge overseeing his case. A court stated that the request to delay the hearing until 12th January had been refused without prejudice, and that submissions must be presented to the court at 10 local time on Monday.
Voters in Barinas, a province in eastern Venezuela that has been controlled by the ruling Socialist Party for more than 2 decades, will return to polling places on Sunday to cast polls in a do-over gubernatorial election.
A wall of rock collapsed on boats carrying tourists in Brazil's Furnas Lake, which caused casualties. At least 7 people have died and 9 were seriously injured. The people hurt in the accident had broken bones and 1 was in a serious condition in hospital with head and facial injuries, officials say.
World food prices have risen to level never reached for 10 years. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, food prices jumped 28% in 2021, contributing to acceleration in inflation seen last year against the backdrop of recovery economic. More with Nabil Khazini.
According to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, global food prices reached a 10-year high in 2021, rising by an average of 28% compared to the previous year. According to Abdulrazak Abbasian, the prices in all food categories jumped last year due to strong demand. And despite last December's fall, Abbasian said that a return to more stable market conditions this year are slim.
While normally high prices are expected to give way to increased production, the high cost of input, ongoing global pandemic, and ever more uncertain climatic conditions leave little room for optimism about a return to more stable market conditions even in 2022.
Over the year as a whole, the vegetable oil price index jumped on average by almost 66% compared to 2020, reaching its highest level ever recorded. Grain prices rose by 27%, hitting a level not seen since 2012, with corn prices soaring 44.1% and wheat rising 31.3%. Sugar also knew a strong growth of 29.8% over the previous year and reached its highest level since 2016. Higher food prices have contributed to a broader surge in inflation as economies recover from the coronavirus crisis, and the FAO has warned that the higher costs are putting poorer populations at risk in countries reliant on imports.
It is something normal, always food prices rising. The Turkish Statistical Office stated that goods prices rose by 30% last month compared to the same period in 2020. The highest number since October 2020. The inflation reached 30% before President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's party came to power. Hussein Berkan.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan continues to defend his economic options a year and a half before organizing the next presidential elections, while official data showed that inflation in the country reached its highest level. The Turkish Statistics Authority announced that inflation rose to 36% on an annual basis. This ratio is a record since 2002 due to the significant decline of the Turkish lira against the dollar during 2021. Popular vegetables such as potato, onion, eggplants, green beans have seen price increases of more than 50%. This increase in goods prices is 7 times higher than the government's primary goal. Most central banks are raising interest rates to help cool inflation, but Turkey has gone the other way. This led to the collapse in the value of lira after President Recep Tayyip Erdogan prioritized exports over stabilizing the lira that lost 44% of its value against the dollar last year and fell again 5% on Monday before recovering and remaining steady.
European Central Bank has warned of the repercussion of the acceleration energy transition on the pending record inflation crisis plaguing Europe. The top monetary authority stated that the energy transition would keep inflation high for a long period and increase the risk of destabilizing inflation expectation in light of supply disruption. Zara Furjani.
The rise in inflation rates to its highest levels in the euro area prompts the highest monetary authority in Europe to recognize the direct repercussions of what the European Central Bank called the risks of an accelerated and ill-considered energy transition in Europe.
In an environment of large access savings and protracted supply disruptions, the energy transition may lead to inflation remaining higher for longer, thereby potentially raising the risks of inflation expectations destabilizing.
The European official described the energy transformation taking place in Europe as an escalating danger to the European Central's expectations regarding inflation in the continent.
The energy transition poses an upside risk to the European Central Bank's inflation outlook for the time being, while there are no indications of a broader second round.
Warnings came after the European Central Bank admitted that it had lost the compass of its trend and expectations regarding indicators of rising consumer prices.
Technical expectations of energy price inflation are surrounded by uncertainty. It is sufficient for oil prices to remain at November 2021 levels to reach the expected level of Bank's inflation index by 2024.
The European Central Bank faces a worst-case scenario after inflation hit a record high last month, rising 5% in 1 month, driven by a record increase in energy prices.
More of the economic news in this rundown by Nabil Khazini.
The French National Commission for Informatics and Freedom imposes on Google to pay 150 million euros and Facebook 60 million euros for violating European rules on the protection of private data. US tech giants, including the likes of Apple and Amazon, have come under growing pressure over their business practices across Europe, where they have faced massive fines and plans to impose far-reaching EU rules on how they operate. Kazakhstan plunged into chaos this week. An internet shutdown hit the world's second biggest Bitcoin mining hub. The internet shutdown in Kazakhstan took an estimated 15% of the world's Bitcoin miners offline. According to the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, Kazakhstan is just behind the US in terms of its share of the global Bitcoin mining market, with 18.1% of all crypto mining. Technology giant Samsung Electronics announced it expects a 52% jump in profit for the last 3 months of 2021. The global chip shortage was in favor of the Korean company, which estimates that it made $11.5 billion won in the period. This comes after the company's chip manufacturing operation in Xi'an, China, went into lockdown from 23 December following a coronavirus outbreak. Qatar Airways company blames the European plane maker Airbus for surface flaws on A350 jetliners. The Gulf company also asked for additional compensation of $4 million for every day, or 21 days, the period of the company's A350 planes remained grounded. Qatar Airways also asked France-based Airbus not to attempt to deliver any more of the jets until what it describes as a design defect has been fixed.
The golden reflector, the centerpiece of the new James Webb telescope, was straightened out on Saturday into its fall. The biggest astronomical mirror ever sent to space is assembled, completes epic deployment sequence, and ready for focusing. Islam see it fly over, and for this topic and has more to deliver. Let's follow it.
The James Webb Space Telescope has finished a challenging 2-week deployment phase, unfolding its massive, gold-plated, flower-shaped mirror panel in preparation for studying every phase of the cosmic history. More powerful than the Hubble Space Telescope, the $10 billion Webb Space Telescope scans the sky for light flow from the first stars and galaxies formed 13.7 billion years ago. To do this, NASA needed to equip the Webb with the largest and most sensitive mirror ever released, which scientists call the golden eye. The telescope is so big that it had to be folded like origami to fit inside a rocket. The solar screen the size of a tennis court was unfurled earlier this week, which was the most dangerous operation. The shield is permanently installed between the telescope and the Sun, Earth and Moon, and the sun-facing side can withstand temperatures up to 110 degrees Celsius.
Webb has the potential to blow people away, even people who are used to pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. And I know that is hard to imagine. He's led the Webb Mirror development team as the US Space Agency NASA. Webb is so powerful. Almost anywhere we look, we are going to be breaking new ground in a huge way.
Webb should arrive at a destination of 1.6 million kilometers away in the next 2 weeks. According to NASA, setting up a telescope takes about 5.5 months. The next steps include adjusting the telescope's optical system and calibrating the scientific instrument. If all goes well, scientific observations will begin this summer. Astronomers want to go closer to the Big Bang that shaped the universe 100 million years after Hubble, in addition to the study of distant planets to determine their origin and evolution.
Some sports news now in this roundup, mentioning the football world's top headlines. Let's hear it.
In a key moment just before the break, Omar Alderete was judged to have brought Casemiro down in the box, allowing Benzema to fire a penalty high into the net. Valencia felt Casemiro had run into the challenge and they could muster little in the way of response as they capitulated after the interval. A late Valencia rally saw Courtois severe up eye-catching saves, but Benzema closed the night out with class as he spun in the box to coolly side-foot Real's fort. Ancelotti's side are now 27 games unbeaten at home in La Liga. Benzema's remarkable brace paved the way for the French striker to breach the 300-goal mark at Real Madrid. Benzema netted his 300th goal for Carlo Ancelotti's men after the Santiago Bernabéu stalwarts were awarded a penalty 2 minutes before the end of the first half. Successfully converting the penalty to the La Liga, Benzema not only opened the scoring for the hosts, but the former Olympique Lyonnais star entered the exclusive 300-goal club. Benzema, who has 301 goals for Madrid, is 7 goals short of surpassing Di Stefano, who managed to find the back of the net as many as 308 times for the Los Blancos. Former Real Madrid captain Raúl is ahead of Stefano with 323 goals to his name for the La Liga heavyweights. Goal machine and club legend Cristiano Ronaldo is still Madrid's all-time leading goal scorer with 451 goals under his belt. AC Milan star Zlatan Ibrahimovic has equaled unique goals record initially set by Cristiano Ronaldo after his latest Series A strike against Venezia. The Sweden international opened the scoring at Pierre-Ligi Penzo Stadium with just 2 minutes on the clock, turning home at Rafael Leao cross from close range in trademark fashion. Ibrahimovic has now scored against 80 different clubs across Europe's major leagues, becoming the second man to achieve the feat alongside Ronaldo.
It is worth mentioning that African Cup of Nations has already started at 5 p.m. and the host country Cameroon is taking the lead against Burkina Faso 2-1. And seems that 10 minutes left to the end of the game. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder of our main stories. Chinese city of Tianjin tested 40 million people after COVID outbreak, and the port near Beijing began mass testing after 11 children and adults tested positive, including at least 2 with Omicron. As order is restored in Kazakhstan, its future remains murky. The tragic events of last week, in which dozens lost their lives, have exposed hidden political tensions. An airstrike in Ethiopia's Tigray region killed 56 people and injured 30, including children, in a camp for displaced people. Amazing milestone, James Webb telescope fully deployed in space. Webb's trail will scan the cosmos for light streaming from stars in galaxies from 30 billion years ago. That's all the news we have grabbed in today's bulletin. Thank you so much for being with us. See you tomorrow and have a blessed evening. Bye-bye.